September 21st, 1996, Belgrade, Montana. 15-year-old Danielle "Danny" Houchins left home in her pickup truck. She drove to the Cameron Bridge, a fishing access on the Gallatin River. It was a place she knew well, a quiet place, a place that was supposed to be safe. But that evening, she did not return. When hours passed with no sign of Danny, her family grew alarmed. Her mother, Cheryl, drove out to look for her. At the river, she found Danny's truck, sitting alone, unlocked. Just a few steps down the trail lay her keys and her water bottle, dropped as if they had slipped from her hand. But Danny herself was gone. Deputies searched the area until dark, then called off the effort. That night, family friends, unwilling to stop, pressed deeper into the willows with flashlights. They were the ones who found her. Danny's body lay face down in shallow, muddy water beneath a willow tree. At first glance, it could have looked like a drowning, but the scene told a different story. The ground told the story of a struggle, of drag marks gouged into the earth, pulling away from the path and into the brush. Signs that she had not gone there on her own. Someone had pulled her body into the marsh and concealed it from view. Decades later, the man who placed her there would sit across from investigators. Their cameras would capture him as his composure broke apart. That footage will be seen before this story ends. But first, we must return to 1996, to the investigation that failed her in its first days. Back then, the official story from the Gallatin County Sheriff's Office was simple. Cause of death, drowning. Manner of death, undetermined. Publicly, officials insisted there were no cuts, no bruises, nothing that proved foul play. They suggested it could have been an accident. The press repeated that story. But Danny's body told a different story. The autopsy revealed the truth. Bruises, mud, forced deep into her airways, injuries consistent with a violent assault, and those obvious drag marks that proved she did not go into the willows on her own. Inside the department, some investigators called it what it was: homicide. One deputy later recalled being openly mocked for saying so. And so, with the official story caught between uncertainty and denial, the case went cold. Leads dried up. The file sat dormant. But one person refused to let the truth die: Danny's sister, Stephanie. She vowed she would not stop pushing until her sister's killer was found. For more than 2 decades, she was the lone voice, convinced it was murder, while the system refused to agree. Years later, the sheriff from that time would claim that, privately, the case was always treated as a homicide. But for Danny's family, what happened privately meant nothing, when publicly their daughter's case was left to die. For 23 years, that's where the story stayed, frozen until 2019. A new sheriff took office, and with him, a new promise. Evidence, carefully preserved since 1996, was brought back into the light. Semen recovered from Danny's clothing, and 4 rootless hairs found on her body. Hairs that at the time were thought to be useless, but science had changed. And from those long-forgotten hairs, scientists extracted what they had once thought was impossible: a full DNA profile. The final answer came from a tool that would have sounded like science fiction in 1996: forensic genetic genealogy. The DNA profile, built from that single hair, was passed to a team led by C.C. Moore, one of the country's foremost investigators in the field. Her team began the painstaking work building a family tree from anonymous DNA. The genetic lines pointed to a family with several brothers, but there was a problem. They all lived on the East Coast. The entire case now hinged on a single question: could any one of them be placed in Montana in the fall of 1996? Moore searched for any public record, any digital breadcrumb, and then she found it. On his own Facebook page, one of the brothers had posted about his life. He wrote that he had just moved to the Bozeman area in the fall of 1996, the same time Danny was killed. A digital breadcrumb, left by the suspect himself, placed him at the right place at the right time. For the first time in over 2 decades, investigators didn't have a theory. They had a name: Paul Nathaniel Hutchinson. In 1996, he was a 27-year-old graduate student at Montana State University, studying the very rivers and wildlands that surrounded him. For the next 2 decades, he built a life, a career as a respected fisheries biologist. No criminal record, a wife, a father of 2. Colleagues knew him as reliable and soft-spoken. In Montana's tight-knit hunting and fishing community, Hutchinson was a trusted outdoorsman, a man immersed in the life of the river. Nothing about his life drew suspicion. Nothing suggested the monster he truly was. And yet, the DNA was absolute. Beneath the image of the dedicated scientist, the quiet family man, was the predator who had attacked a teenage girl he did not know and held her face down in the shallow water until she was gone. July 23, 2024. Investigators drove to Dillon to the office of Paul Hutchinson. He welcomed them inside his office at the Bureau of Land Management. Their body cameras were rolling. The conversation began as a ruse, a simple request for an expert's guidance on local waterways. At first, the questions were easy, about rivers, hunting grounds, fishing spots. Hutchinson never seemed quite comfortable. The investigators said they needed background information to aid in the investigation of several deaths. One by one, they showed him pictures of the victims. For nearly 2 hours, the questions continued, slowly, methodically, circling closer to the truth. And as they did, Hutchinson's composure began to fray. Any thought that he remained free of his actions was replaced by a visible, crushing weight.
Why the hell? What's up? Can you give me a second?
Absolutely. Okay, this is Danielle Houchins. She was killed in September of '96,
Okay.
and she was found off the Gallatin River. Did you ever fish up there?
I trapped on the Gallatin.
Have you ever heard of the Cameron Bridge access? Mm-hmm. Have you been there before?
Probably. Jackrabbit Lane?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Ever seen her there? Or a similar face?
I honestly don't. I mean, I've been to a bunch of fishing access sites for one reason or another.
Is there a possibility that you were there when she was murdered?
No.
You weren't trapping or anything during that time?
Not in September. That would have been. Oh. Are you asking me? I mean.
I'm just asking if you remember anything during that time.
No. No.
He didn't know it, but he was starring in the final reel of his own life story. In the early hours of the next morning, Hutchinson made a phone call to the sheriff's office. He asked for assistance, then hung up. Deputies found him on the roadside, dead, a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Post-mortem DNA testing removed all doubt. It was a perfect match. Investigators could finally close the book. The crime was one of opportunity, a sexual assault followed by murder. At the press conference announcing the breakthrough, Danny's sister, Stephanie, delivered the final verdict.
Gratitude to Tom Elfmont for overcoming every roadblock. To Dan Springer, thank you for being a man of your word. The sheriff lied to my parents, bold-faced lied and betrayed the trust of shocked and grieving parents. Those institutions failed my sister, failed my family, and failed this community.
For nearly 3 decades, Danielle Houchins' death was a question mark, an accident, a mystery. But the truth was never silent. It was written in the drag marks in the mud. It was waiting, preserved in the science of a single hair. It was hidden in the branches of a family tree. And in the end, it was captured in the panicked eyes of a killer as his carefully built world finally fell apart.